All right. So with Alien Romulus that just dropped, Maria and myself felt the need that we absolutely had to get our reaction, our review, and everything recorded and sent out there. We have not discussed anything, not even a lick, not not
No.
even a single oxygen breath. Pumped from a face hugger. Have we talked about this movie at all? We've kept
Nope.
completely everything quiet. So this is all going to be new to us as we describe this. And I'm really curious to see what you think, as well as what I think, because I've been trying to unpack and unravel this thing all night this morning, and I'm wrestling with myself to give it a fair score. I'll put it that way, right? Are,
Oh
are, are
yeah.
you there too? Okay.
I'm so on board so far.
The way that we're going to do this is we're going to separate it by act. So we're going to talk about the first act first, and of course, then the second act of the movie, and then the third act, and then we could talk about some notes, some themes, some things that we saw that the director might have done to help either do some good callbacks, as well as some things that maybe he did that was original. Yeah? You want to
Okay.
get into it?
Yeah. Sounds
Well, on
good.
that note, thank you for watching NASS. Again, this is going to be a bonus episode where we're going to be dissecting the movie Alien Romulus. So let's just get right into it. So,
All right.
um, first, what was your initial excitement level for this movie?
My initial excitement level for this movie was extremely high. It was, I think, tied for my most anticipated movie of the year. And over the last couple of weeks, I rewatched the entire Alien franchise, including Alien versus Predator, not Requiem, just 'cause I couldn't. But I watched all of them, and my excitement level for it grew tenfold. Like I was so excited for this movie that I was a little nervous that I was gonna be too excited and needed to like calm down. Like this is how excited I was for this movie. I was so ready for it. So pumped.
Nice. So I'm super was excited for it as well. I didn't binge them all in the last like week or two because it would have felt a little too xenomorph overload for me. So what I've actually been doing is separating them for like the last couple months or so. So I kind of watched the first one and then waited about a couple of weeks and I watched the second one and then I watched Resurrection and went back and watched part three. You know, I did see some of Prometheus as well. I don't do Alien versus Predator. I should go back and rewatch that, but it's okay. Those don't count
It
as old
shouldn't.
alien movies. Yeah, they don't count as alien movies to me at all.
Yeah.
Whatever. Okay, so both of us really excited for this. This one was my most anticipated. You said this was your equally. What was your other one that you're as equally as?
Was so excited for Long Legs, and that was a huge disappointment to me. I did not like it. And yeah, this was tied with it. And yeah, we'll see.
Okay. All right, so let's get into it then. So, what were you nervous about seeing with this movie? Let's start off there. Like, what did you not want to see in this movie for it to be considered a disappointment?
My expectations for this film were so high because again, Fede Alvarez, love him. He made my favorite horror movie ever, Evil Dead remake. So I know how he can take source material from franchises and make it beautiful and more relevant, more disturbing and everything, and keep the callbacks without and but with building his own story for it, and it feels fresh and new, but still has the heart of the original franchise. So I was super pumped that he had this in his grasp. And so what was the question? I kind of went off the thing there. What was I?
It's
Oh yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Yes.
What was I if I okay, I wasn't concerned at all about anything disappointing me because of the time that this movie is taking place in the story. I guess maybe I was assuming that it was going to be taking place in between Alien and Aliens more time that the movie was made, not like in the story timeline. So there's things that I wasn't even expecting. So I didn't think I was going to be disappointed at all.
Got it.
I didn't.
Okay. Yeah.
That's vague until we get to where we're going. Yeah.
Yes. All right. All right. And then we'll let everybody know when we actually get into spoilers heavy, which is gonna be
Yeah.
very soon. So for
Yeah.
me, I was because we've got Prometheus, which in fairness, they didn't share that they didn't really sell that as an alien movie at the time, right? We kind of thought it was something different. We didn't exactly know. Once Alien Covenant came out, then it was like, okay, this is an alien sequel-ish kind of, even though we already saw Prometheus and already no, that didn't really count to me. So this is like the first real Alien sequel we've gotten since Alien Resurrection. So I'm super excited. I was excited to watch it anyways. The thing about when I started seeing these trailers is, like you said, the director, Fede, is awesome. He's amazing. He's brilliant. So my excitement level, his shots in the trailer were unbelievable. I was so convinced by everything that I was seeing, the pacing, the way that everything looked, the color, the things that I always look for with the new Alien movies. That the great thing about the first four is that they each changed and did something, they changed the genre. So every tone of each movie felt a little different. Each director added something a little different. They extended the lore of the xenomorph. So every Alien movie should do that. So that's why with this one, I was hoping, what is he going to do that's different? What is he going to add to it? It's going to be a little original. Is he going to change the tone a little bit, or is it going to be a copycat of something else? That was always the worry. When I saw the trailer, it felt this is Alien. It feels like
Yes.
Alien. He's doing so much practical, real prosthetics, less CGI. Thank God, which we were dying for. So I was excited for it. The thing that would have made it disappointing is if the story sucked, is that they would have done way too many callbacks and it didn't feel like it was original at all. Where it felt like just everything they did was just regurgitated, that would have bothered me. And if it's just felt very lackluster, if it felt very boring, if the pacing was really slow or like way too fast, like right. So that's where it would have fallen off for me. So
After watching the trailers for it, the trailers had me hooked, and all the interviews about all the practical effects had me so convinced. I was like, "Oh, it's going to be all practical effects." What?
guaranteed.
Because what? Mhm. And what would have disappointed me was if he did too much. I like more of an intimate, tight, focused storyline. So I was
Mhm.
expecting that. I didn't want any grandiose, like, okay, this is going way too overboard. This doesn't feel like Alien or Aliens anymore. And if they did way too much CG, which they said they weren't going to do, so I was like, okay. So
Yeah,
I would have been disappointed if they
exactly.
did.
Exactly. And when, like you said, everything that they showed us that they were filming about this movie, it was a lot of practical sets. Everything looked perfect, so much that I was calling the shot in our chat by saying this movie's going to be great. It has to be great. It's really hard to mess this up with everything that we saw. They were showing us already new stuff. Like you saw the shot with the character Navarro, which is the pilot, where you saw like an X-ray thing, you saw like a chest burster. That's not spoilers because we saw in the trailer. You see the chest burster there. So I was already seeing a lot of cool new original things. We saw things like the character Andy, which is the AI. We saw cool things that he was doing in the trailer that already felt very original and very fresh. So it felt like it hit all the marks that it needed to be a great alien movie. Where does it rank on the spectrum? That was going to be the question mark, right? It's like
Yes.
it felt like it was going to be worthy of a sequel. And I think it's fair to say it was, right? It's worthy of an Alien sequel, in my opinion. We'll give a very,
Mm.
very overall answer. What do you think? Yes? Was it worthy to be an Alien sequel?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
Now, should we get into spoiler talk?
Let's do it, please.
All
Oh,
right. So
please.
let's get into Act One.
Let me tell you, Daniel, the opening scene, I'm gonna get emotional talking about it because I was getting so shaky and wanting to cry that opening scene. So brilliant to have it dead silent in the beginning. And I was like, oh, this is so perfect. What a smart, genius thing to have. It was so
Hmm.
silent. And then you see inside the ship, the technology was so retro looking, so on point. The sounds were awesome. And the freaking score kicks in, and I was like, oh, tears are coming. I see the font pop up, and I'm like, okay. It looked so authentic to the original Alien, and it felt like I was going back to like the 70s. And it just it really, the first opening sequence had me like, I'm gonna leave this theater and be crying tears of joy and like so excited. The opening sequence grabbed me. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it opened up so brilliantly. I said the same thing as soon as I saw it. I was like, he nailed it. I was
Yeah.
like, it's exactly what I said. I felt so warranted by my opinion already because we've seen so many movies come out that have been massive disappointments, ones that just can't seem to stick the landing even if they had like promising openings. And that was the thing about this movie is that it just looked so it just felt so you nailed it that it was really, really, really hard to see how this guy was going to screw this up. So the fact that you opened it up with that, phenomenal. I'm excited. Great opening. So
Mhm.
let's move on to the next part.
When we get to like the planet, and I don't know, for some reason, I was kind of hoping that it was gonna be kind of more prequelish to Aliens, like what happened in between Alien and Aliens, because at the time period. So I thought we were gonna be on the planet from Aliens, and we were gonna learn how it all happened to that planet, how Xenomorph Queen got there, all that stuff. So I was like pumped for all that, and then I'm like, oh, okay, it's a different planet, so we're on a different planet. Which
Okay, see, for me, I actually loved it because it gave its own original storyline. If you would have gone back and showed it, I felt like, okay, now you're that's the thing that I feared. Don't go back to the well. Don't give me the
mm,
exact same thing we've already seen where it almost feels like a prequel. Give it its own world.
mhm,
And they've referenced it in Alien and Aliens about the mining colonization.
mhm,
We actually saw that now. So to actually
mm,
go there and give us this whole real world, to me is sort of expanding the world of Alien. I'm like,
mhm.
finally, it's not just people stuck on a ship or people just stuck on this like xenomorph type planet. Like that's all that we're seeing. It finally gave us something where like it feels like real life people that exist beyond just the spaceship and the people that like, that Wayland and all that is like fighting for, and and where they're pulling from. We were actually able to really see that. And when you first open up and you have the character Rain and she's looking at the sun, you think, oh my God, that's nice. And you see her wake up. I thought,
Yeah,
yes, how
that was
awesome
great.
was that?
That
Yeah,
was so
right.
great.
Because
I loved that.
like it opened it up beautifully because it told us so much about the character without her having to say anything. You saw
Yes.
exactly what her dreams and ambitions were, and you just showed rather than told, which is awesome. So again, phenomenal start, Fede.
Yeah, I think that was really good too. Again, my excitement level was still so like, oh, okay, here we go. And then having her brother be like the synth and him like glitching, so it seemed like he had like mentally challenged problems. I'm like, that is so brilliant. I loved that. He's like glitching his face, his acting and his facial twitches and everything. It was so perfect. I loved that, and I thought it gave you such more sympathy for him. Even though I'm like, he's just in my head, I'm like, he's just glitching, but because he seemed like a simple person, I was like, oh, that was a brilliant way for us to have new sympathy for like one of the robot droid synth people.
Yeah, and David Johnson freaking crushed it. That guy, I don't know too much about him. I saw this movie, I was like, this guy's gonna be amazing. Like his
Yeah.
career is gonna be awesome. The way he was doing like the blinking, like the physical acting he was doing for the character was great. Like
Yes.
what you said, it was brilliant to me. And that's when I said this is the greatest like synth we've seen in this because it made us bond to this character so
Yeah.
much. It
Yeah.
added, like you said, that mental kind of illness that we saw with it. And I just thought it
Mhm.
was so brilliant. So to have the character, because we've always followed Ripley where she doesn't trust the Sins. They were evil, they
Mhm.
were this, and like you almost work with them just enough to try to overcome the obstacles that you have, but you still don't trust them. And this one is complete trust. You have the exact opposite on this, and I thought it was such a brilliant freaking move. And I was just like, yes, this guy's
Mhm.
giving us something so new and fresh. I was so excited.
I know, I felt all that. I felt all the same feelings. I was so
Hmm.
excited about that. That's one of my notes too. I liked the dynamic of all the friends together. I like there was
Hmm.
like the quiet, innocent type girl, even though she was pregnant. But and then there was like a brother sister aspect, so you have a connection there, so you can be emotionally connected to them. And then you have like the pilot who seemed like she had a relationship with that guy with the bandana a little bit because they had a little intimate moment, I think. So everyone has these connections to
Yeah.
each other. I really felt like everyone were friends, you know? I like their
Hmm.
dynamic. I was a little confused how they could just take the ship up. They're like, "Oh, we're stuck on this planet, but yet we can just take a ship up to space anytime we want." It was just that part was kind of like this guy's watching them take off. Like, is that can you explain that to me?
Yeah, no, no, I agree. So first I want to start with the dynamics of the characters, right? So
Yes.
I mean this in a positive way that they fit the cliches that we've seen before. It felt very
Yeah.
Alien Resurrection. The type of
Mm,
characters felt very Alien Resurrection, where you had the character of what was his name? Bjorn, I think, which was like the a-hole, the cousin. The one
yeah.
with the bandana. He fit the Ron Perlman character. You always had like the badass pilot, which was like the Navarro character that they had. So she
Hmm.
even kind of fit the one that they had. That I think was it Vasquez, I think it was, or whatever. That
Hmm.
was in Aliens. So like they had certain stereotypes, but I thought it was cool, and the fact that they needed the Andy guy, which would they kind of just pulled along Rain, but then they liked her too. It felt like they fit the need of why she needed to go to sort of get off the planet because they said she needed like another 5 more years of servitude, which she wasn't going to be able to do. So I like that aspect. But them being able to get off, I thought the same thing. So I don't know if it's because maybe they had some kind of special clearance of being able to, maybe they were more like depositing of certain materials, so almost like different roles, kind of, I guess. But the fact that they're able to fly up and go to the ship that had the stuff and like nobody cared and nobody was like surveilling it, you figured there'd be some kind of security people like protecting it because they wouldn't want anybody to just go there, right? Because like even if the government or whatnot knew about this, they'd still have it protected, even if it was something that was confidential and they didn't want people to get it.
It was a little strange how like this group of like young, I think they're supposed to be kind of like teenage type people, kind of
Mhm.
weird how like they just go up there and they just go on there. Like you say, like the government would know, or like they'd want to salvage everything from in there. Obviously it was a hard time down here on there. So it's like how they knew it was there and no one else knew it was there, and they were so easily. That part to me was kind of like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
still here though. I'm still along for the ride, but I'm kind of
Yeah.
confused, but I'm here for it.
Yeah, it was like a question mark, but what I thought was really cool was when they said, oh, we have to hurry up and get there before somebody else takes it, about the
Hmm.
cryogenic thing. I thought was really cool. 'Cause I've never really seen a story where they had to go and take the cryogenic, like basically fuel or whatever that is, in order for
Hmm.
them to freeze to be able to go to the next planet. I thought that was really cool. It would have been really cool if they had other rogue groups like them that were trying to go and could have been on the ship. They could have been fodder for the xenomorphs. I
Ooh.
thought that would have been really cool because you could have had some kind of dynamic of people trying to take each other out, almost like it was like a race to get to some of these things. You
Yeah.
could have played some dynamics there with that. And I thought, okay, now I'm buying more of it because it's almost like maybe the government and whatnot allowed them to get through. They're allowing these
Mhm.
people to go there and become this fodder and whatnot to use it for their experimentation. But like they didn't do that.
That would have been a lot easier way to explain everything, and that would have added a lot more tension. It would have added a lot more kills. Would have added a lot more like graphic, pick up the pace a little bit stuff, action and horror. Yeah, it would that would have been smart. That would have been smart.
But what do I know? It's not like I write or anything.
No.
Yeah. So that was basically our inciting incident and a way of kind of getting onto the ship, right? Which was really cool,
Right.
really awesome. So far, despite the little hiccup that we had, I was still on board and saying this is absolutely amazing. It was
Hmm.
genius. I loved it. It was one of my favorite storylines to start off the story. Like I thought Aliens had a really cool one as well, which I really
Hmm.
adored. I really loved Alien Resurrection as well. I thought their little opening intro was amazing as well. This one was right in line with that. I thought it was really cool. It made it feel very realistic. Even saw like the little video game, that Andy was playing. The world looked very lived in, which is
Yes.
something that's very, very, important because you get a lot of sci-fi where it doesn't. This one
Hmm.
felt very lived in. It felt like a real world that people were really using. The technology felt real, and it blended really well with the Alien and Aliens technology that we saw back then. It looked very realistic, didn't it?
Yeah, I had absolutely no complaints about any of that. That was all gorgeous and smart. Everything was all those aspects were perfect to me. Well, first of all, I love the scene when she sees the sun, and it was just so beautiful, that shot where she's covering her face, and I was like,
Mm.
this is so right there. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be so beautiful. It's gonna be amazing. I just
Yes.
love that whole shot was
The
just gorgeous and
shots,
stunning.
huh?
The shots in this movie are
Probably the best out of
immaculate.
all it's probably seriously the best shot. Okay, I won't go into too detail here, but
No.
the first half of the movie, the first hour, I don't know if he had more time to film them or not, but the first half of the movie, the shots felt so immaculate. They were
Mm,
unbelievable. They were
mm.
absolutely amazing. And I would argue probably the best shots we've seen out of the entire franchise. The first half. The second half, I won't go into too much detail, but it felt like it kind of fell a little bit. Like it wasn't so focused on the shots, and maybe it was built more on the tension, and maybe that was just a deliberate choice on his end. I didn't notice as many amazing shots and beautiful cinematography in the second half of the film. It was all reserved in that first half of setting up that world. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. There were a few shots in like the second half where I was like, oh, but then it was kind of like, oh, good, we get another beautiful shot again. It's like he kind of like, yeah, you're right. It's like it
Mm-hmm.
kind of felt disconnected, and then it was like, oh yeah, there's that gorgeous lighting and beautifully framed shot, and like felt really, yeah. But
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying totally. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's keep it moving.
To me, this felt a little
Little detail.
slow. Like it was a
Yeah.
little. I like how they introduced the anti-gravity thing. I'm like, okay, this is foreshadowing. We're gonna definitely
Mm-hmm.
need this anti-gravity. This is gonna play a
Mm-hmm.
huge part in this movie. And I kind of liked it because it added the different aspects and it felt kind of video game-ish. That's just something you'd have to do in a video game. It's like, okay, the timer's coming. We got to set the anti-gravity. We got to do this. We got to make sure we get through these parts. All that was cool. It was a little slow and drawn out before we saw any sort of face hugger or anything like that. And I was kind of like, where are they? When are we gonna see a xenomorph? Like I was kind of getting a little impatient, but
Mm-hmm.
everything still did look lovely, and they were building up the characters and the relationship and like the conflicts between certain ones.
I like the pacing. I was happy with it because outside of Alien Resurrection introduces xenomorphs very early. The
Yeah.
other three didn't. We really didn't see them until like the second half of the movie. So this one was
Mm,
following in line with the pacing and the timings, which I'm perfectly content with. The anti-gravity thing I thought was really cool. And I guess there's definitely an Alien video game, I guess that's super popular that was a lot of that was incorporated in this one. So I'm assuming, a lot of the sets and things resembled it or pulled from it, which seemed really cool. So I think that's why it kind of had a little bit of that video game feel. I thought it was really cool that their intent was to go there and steal that again, that cryogenic fuel, sort of like in
yes.
order to go. It felt very low level. It felt very Rogue One to me, where things were so, we've seen the high tech, we've seen the richness of stuff. It's kind of nice to come back and people are just trying to steal something that to them was like so expensive and so, like that was the need for them to go and put their lives in danger, especially like these teenagers, maybe young 20 something year olds. It made sense. Like I love that aspect of it. I was super content with that until they, and then they went up to the lab. So let's go into that scene.
When they're in the lab and they get stuck in there because they try to take the fuel or the cryo fuel out and it
Hmm.
sets off something. Like I said, and then
A
everything starts
domino effect.
yes, and everything starts heating up, which is releasing the face huggers. There were a lot. There were a lot of face huggers. And I was like, okay, that's cool. When the face huggers started coming out and going like in the water, I love the water part because I'm like, this is
Hmm.
like Alien Resurrectionish. He's taking
Hmm.
like a little bit of from each movie here. He's doing this. So I like the water part. I felt tense during all of it. I was getting kind of nervous and creeped out. I'm like, oh my god, it's happening. This is when my first like small disappointment came out. I just wasn't expecting so many face huggers and it being so CG.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think with me, it was like I thought what was cool about this was that he made the face huggers more of a thing, right? Because like
Mhm.
you see it in Alien where it's just like the one and it was more of an event in a moment to try to explain about how the xenomorph gets planted. Throughout this movie, they kept making the face hunger a real threat and they kept coming back and all that. And I thought that was really cool. We haven't quite explored that to that level. It didn't bother me that there was so many. I knew they went CGI with it. It was like that first 30 minutes that we talked about the movie. I was like, this is perfect. This is
Yeah.
genius. It's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with this outside of
Yeah.
little tiny things like, okay, I wonder this. But like, again, it's just easy explainable things. I'm sure that they'll explain later.
Mhm.
It was when we started seeing some of this stuff that little tiny things started creeping in a little bit where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, my score's dropping a little bit now.
I think the marketing too really had me thinking this is going to be very practical effects, like only like just the way
Hmm.
and all everything's on Instagram with like the robotic face hugger and everything. It's just when they all start coming out like going over each other, I'm like, okay, so this is looks really like this is really like okay.
Hmm.
There's way more CG in this movie than I was led to believe. So I'm like, this doesn't
Yeah.
feel 100% like what I thought it was supposed to be. So I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
which is fine. So in my head, that was
Yeah.
the first like forgive it,
Hmm.
forgive it.
Okay, so I like the idea that that they got stuck. The face huggers were coming out. It was getting warm as they were trying to get it. The guy Bjorn, I think his name or whatever, like his hands started freezing. I
Yeah.
thought that was really cool. They put him in peril.
Yeah.
He found the electricity stick. They had to get the chip and put inside
Loved it.
Andy. I thought was so awesome because it
Loved
started
it.
altering him, and I was like, yes, like
Yes.
that's why the CGI thing, I know it sucked and it was annoying, but it was more about my own expectations. Like I thought something whatever, and I can quickly dissolve that knowing I have to take the movie for what the director's giving me. The director's
Yes.
giving me this. He felt the need. He had to do that to give it the scare. Whatever. I can get over it. It didn't bother me that much because it wasn't the storyline. You know what I mean? It was more like a technical aspect. As long as the CGI didn't look bad, which it didn't,
Mm.
I just wish it was more prosthetic, whatever. But this is what he wanted to do. That's fine. I can live with it. I thought that was really cool. Even the scare about how to get it, how they had to get out, and you saw that
Yeah.
they forced the reason on how the two girls had to come out to be able to let them out. I thought was really cool. Got them all
Perfect.
together, made sense. Still great movie. I'm still in the 9 range, easily the 9 range at this point.
Yes, and
Okay.
when they put that chip in his neck and his personality swap, I was like, "Oh my God, this actor,
Yeah, that's what I said. I
not
was
at
like,
all the same
David
person."
Johnson, this guy's
Good.
phenomenal. I was like, this guy is amazing. And what's funny is that the synth and your lead woman are always the top two best actors of every Alien
Hmm.
movie. Like they just
Yeah.
are. And this one,
Mhm.
again, yes, it was. But it was
Yeah.
like that synth, man. He crushed it.
I really loved seeing that impaled droid robot science guy there face
Hmm.
down. I'm like, this is so cool. I'm like, awesome. I'm like, oh, they're gonna take that chip out of him and we're gonna see, like, I'm like, cool. Like, I understand it's like the same model, I guess, but then when they flipped it over and it was Ash and it was and then they did the CG face, I was like, okay, okay. I mean, they did the same thing in Rogue One, so I can forgive that, right?
Hmm.
And then I was like, okay, at least he's a robot. They're not trying to like
Yeah.
make it seem like a human. I'm like, okay, cool. That's fine. Still kind of didn't like it. I just don't like that. Uh really, I kind of wish it was totally different droid. Like look totally different, a totally different one.
Hmm.
But it's like, oh, call back, here's Ash. And I'm like, okay, we'll get him for a little bit. Fine. I can deal with it for a little bit. But just how pivotal of a part he was in the movie and how often we had to see him. And I was just
Hmm.
like, I don't know. Kind of that was my first really big like, no, I don't like it. I didn't like that.
Yeah. So when I saw it, I was like, oh crap, they're on the same one, as we saw, right? As like Alien One, like here, here's the ship, here's what we're seeing, essentially. That's where my first fear of like, no, don't go too much into the past. Like you were so good as its own standalone movie and world. And that was always my thing with Alien is you don't have to keep regurgitating the thing of like, oh, well, you loved Alien because of Ripley. Well, yes, I love Ripley. I love Ripley. I love the xenomorph. The xenomorph. You can give me a brand new story and a brand new planet or a brand new ship of something with xenomorphs. That's an alien movie to me. I don't need
Yeah.
the same characters to keep coming back. I don't need this overarching theme to keep being a thing. Just like with Star Wars, we don't need Darth Vader and the Empire to be in every single movie. Like Star
Yeah.
Wars can still be Star Wars without that stuff.
Mhm.
That one was, I was like, ugh, like it was kind of cool to see, but I was like, please. It was like the little bit of that fear of don't overdo this, please. And they
Yeah.
overdid it.
They
But
way oh yeah, they way
yeah.
overdid it. And the thing is too, it wasn't even even if it was like they were on the same ship and it was actually Ash, like it'd be like, okay, but no, it's this Rook one. And I'm thinking,
Hmm.
okay, so I guess all of this model looked the same. Okay. I think having a robot droid synth, whatever you want to call it, in any alien movie is enough of a callback already. Like, okay, oh, we have a synth guy. It
Yeah.
doesn't need to look exactly like that actor. Because first of all, it never looks good. And if you do want to do it, make an actual freaking robot that looks like him.
Yeah.
Like make it
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
freaking
Yeah.
puppet
Yeah.
then. I'd rather
Yeah.
see a practical effect and it looking like that actor than a
Yeah.
CG face put on, and it was just too much. I'm like, okay, his scene's over. We're good. We're good. And then
Yeah.
and it was too bright. The lighting on his face was too bright. There was one scene where it showed Rook in like the shadows or even on like the screen. I'm
Yeah.
like, cool, that's okay.
Yep.
But I still was really disappointed. I'm like, we don't need the exact friggin' guy.
Okay. I agree. And that's where I was like, that's where the fear for me was, but it wasn't like, oh my God, this took a big tumble down yet. It was like I'm just cautious, but it did take a little bit of a drop a little bit. But I'm
Huh?
like, please just keep going the way that you're going. I have confidence that it's gonna self-correct and it's gonna keep going once the xenomorph and everything comes into play. This is not gonna really be a storyline anymore. Let's just keep it going.
And it was me being like, okay, no, just convince yourself this is okay. That was this first
Yeah.
real time where I'm like, no, no, it's right. Right feelings. You feel okay, right? It's okay. And my feeling was
Mhm.
like, no.
Already
Yeah, the
inside your
waiting part, like,
ear. So now, after they release him, that's when the facehugger attaches to Navarro, which you kind of already knew was going to happen because she was so fearful of it, which again, I'm totally fine with because that's Alien, right? We've seen stuff like this happen before. That's totally cool. You see her get attached to her, the way that it wraps around, you see the throat. It was interesting how they said, let's freeze it and let's freeze in the tail. That was something kind of new and original. I'm like,
yeah.
hey, this whole time, you could have just been doing this the whole time. Like, that would have been cool. So you see them doing it, but then the question of, oh, did it already implant in her? And they gave it a 60/40. I thought it was really cool how cold all of a sudden it got of, when they had the Rook character saying, you have to be me now, essentially, by protect them at all costs. Like you cannot let it out like at all. If there's a 60/40 chance, you don't let her on that ship.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. And then you see the character of Andy starting to kind of figure it out and fine tuning and getting better as he's of what he's doing. Him kind of figuring it out, I thought was really cool. So that whole thing, and then when you see her run back, so when you have the character of Bjorn and how he cuts them off and chases and gets the Navarro onto the ship, I thought was really cool because it's like, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? That's where it would have, if they would have been more of a couple of something or some sort, I thought that's where we should have already seen that a little more to know because it seemed like the two cousins were the closest and it seemed like he just straight up left him to die. Now, I don't think his intention was to leave him to die. You know that there's more face huggers and things. You left
Mhm.
them there. That's where I was like, okay, why did you do that? That was already when I was starting having some questionable character choices. But when we finally
Yes.
saw the chest buster, right? That was like the best chest buster I've seen because you even see like the cracked ribs breaking. And I was
Mm.
like, yes. I was like, okay, Fed, you're back on track. Visually, this is amazing. The whole X-ray thing where you see it inside, I thought was so rad. It's like you could tell he set it up, the device, just for that shot,
Yeah,
which I was totally
definitely.
perfectly fine with. But
Mm.
again, you're now introducing the coolest thing we've ever seen. And when you hear like the bones cracking and snapping, that was so horrific. And if I would have ever done an alien movie, that's literally how I would have done a chest buster scene. I would have went straight horror with it because rather than just like the popping out of the thing of like, oh, what a cool looking thing, it's the snapping, it's the physical, our bodies actually having a chest buster in there and busting out
Mhm.
of your chest. Like that's unbelievable.
It was my notes was that's the best chest burster scene I've ever seen. It was
Yes.
the most realistic. It was the most horrifying. Like you say, the slowness of it, and not just like it actually bursting out, but when it came out, it was just like, it was like birthing. It was, and it is
Mhm.
birthing to the point where you saw like a cowl thing on it, like when a baby's born, there's like the amniotic sac.
Mhm.
It had one. It had like a sack peel over it, and I'm like, "This is a
Mhm.
birth, like, it is being birthed out of the chest," and it was so slow, and it was so organic feeling, and I'm like, "This feels like it's really happening," and that was the best chest burster scene I've ever seen too, and it was so good. Like, I was like,
Beautiful.
"Ooh, it's beautiful."
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we're watching
I
it,
loved
those
it.
times in this movie where I was like, ooh, ooh, I don't
Yeah.
usually get all like I don't get like that when I watch movies. And this movie had a lot of those where I was like, oh
Yes.
damn. It was crazy. Like he got me. He got me with some of these scenes, like the feel and the sound effect. Man,
Oh,
that
yeah.
sound effect, you can hear it. Even with when you hear like the face huggers and everything, like you hear the sounds as it's going and swimming and everything. The sound effects was so good. So good. So good. So
So
well
good.
done. So well crafted so far in this movie that even when we
Mhm.
talked about the stuff that kind of bothered us, I was still easily in the 9 range at this movie at this time, especially with when we had that. How about you? What was your score at this point? Were you in the 9 range
Yeah.
still?
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we're
I
right
was
in line.
totally, yeah, totally in the 9 range. I was totally like, I was like, "Okay, this is still perfect." Um, yeah, there's other scenes in it that I gave me that "ooh" feeling too,
Yes. Yes.
which will
So I was looking at the time. At this point, we're like about an hour into the movie already. So that's,
okay,
when we start to get like the xenomorph, like it's starting to creep into an hour, which normal alien movies, that's when we get our xenomorph. So like again, his timing and his pacing is perfect. He's hitting what we're supposed to be hitting. That's how you do it. Because if you introduce the xenomorphs too much, then it makes them almost less formidable because how are you gonna be able to to survive in a 90 minutes of a xenomorph chasing you. Like you have to,
Yeah.
it has to be a short amount of time because they're so good at hunting. You only have so much time that you can escape or kill it. Otherwise, you're dead.
Mhm.
Right.
The
So
only way they could have done it is if they had the two, like the other group of people coming, because then it would prolong to be more people
yes,
to kill off.
exactly. But how cool was that though? That even when you start to see the ship taking off, it starts to go back in and it starts to go right back into their ship until it gets closed off. I was like,
I
yes, this is
know.
so good. I was like, this is so good about how they bring it back in. I'm like, again, really intelligent, really smart, fantastic. I'm sitting there sitting back at this point saying, this is easily top three best alien movies at this point. Like better than Alien Resurrection. This one's amazing. That's where
Ooh.
I was with this one. I'm like, up to that moment, I'm like, this, they're, because they're so, because it's the shot, the cinematography. Like, as much as
Yes.
Jean-Pierre Jeunet had amazing, beautiful shots in Alien Resurrection, I'm only going off the first half. This one had that as well, but it had the intensity. It didn't quite have the goofball tone of this one. It
Yeah.
was more horrific of what part one had. And it was just done so damn well up to this point. I loved the simple nature of it. I love the stripped down. I love the Rogue One style of story for this one that I was so on board with this that I was like, okay, I love this. I love this so far. So far,
Yeah.
we're about halfway through the movie. I felt like vindicated, like, yes, it's exactly what I was hoping for. As long as it keeps going the way that it's going to go, I don't see how this is going to fail. So then the birth of the xenomorph I thought was really good. So when you
Ugh.
see Born, I don't know how do you pronounce Bjorn is
Bjorn?
Bjorn. Bjorn, I think
Bjorn?
so.
Hmm.
Yeah. So when you
Hmm.
see him stab the thing again, you see the acid coming down. That was freaking awesome. When you see him dying by it and dying by the acid, like I thought that was
Oh.
really awesome because it was so because when you see the tail come out and strike him, it was so simple. It was such a simple death, but at the same time so realistic because that's how it would die. And that's why I say sometimes when you get into like the big top level, like the alien, or more like the aliens kind of movie where you're dealing with the higher end stuff, it almost has to be like these big elaborate deaths. But when you're really
Hmm.
sitting there with like a xenomorph, you don't really know what it is and you're looking at it, you would die by
Hmm.
something like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
You don't
that
know
was
what it's
really cool.
capable of.
No. And then when you saw it coming out, like wasn't that such a
Oh.
typical like it looked like a werewolf transformation?
It's
It looked
like
like
the
American Werewolf in London kind of, didn't it? Where you
oh.
kind of saw the and it coming out. Such a universal horror type shots and look and like again, beautiful. Like that's exactly what I'm talking about. Fede nailed the introduction of the xenomorph. Like he was just waiting. You saw his passion for the xenomorph as he birthed it to us.
And you literally see the xenomorph being birthed because that was a very the way that egg looked like it was crowning. Like it was dripping the acid and I'm like, "All right." And then he's trying to get the acid off him and he can't feel the acid burning his frozen fingers. I loved that too. He was like,
Yeah,
"Oh my god,
seriously.
the bone." And like the more you try to wipe it off, the more it's going to eat away at you.
Hmm.
And then when it showed it being there's a lot of birthing in this movie, which I don't mind
Yes.
seeing because I think birthing is horrific
Very horrific, but
and
then it hit a
beautiful.
point where I was like, this is too much. Like it's too much of the same thing. If you would have introduced it like the chest burster, we had that. Cool. And then you saw the xenomorph being birthed from that. Cool. Could have ended
I
it
like
there.
yeah.
We didn't need to see more. We didn't need to see
No,
more.
no,
No,
and
we didn't need to see more.
there's lots of reasons why we didn't need to see more. But
Definitely not.
yeah,
Yeah.
the alien being the xenomorph being birthed out and like the side shot and it being like in the darkness, the claws coming out. Oh, so gorgeous. It looks so good. It was so realistic. That was one of my favorite parts of the movie just because of how it looked. And I really did love the scene where she's walking on the corridor and it's like lit all gold and she's in the middle in the shadow.
Hmm.
That was one of the scenes where it's like that's a beautiful shot like in the beginning.
Yep.
That's what it felt
Yes.
like to me. Yeah.
Yes, and you saw like the rain coming down on her, and you see like the silhouette of it. I'm like, this is beautiful. Again,
Oh yeah.
beautiful
Mhm.
scenery, beautiful set that he constructed. It was beautiful. I'm still sitting
Mhm.
back saying this is one of the best Alien movies. Now, you can sit there and argue what order, whatever. The fact that we're even having the conversation means it's a major win at this point. I was still so happy with all of this. Like, I'm still
Mhm.
perfectly content, again, because even that Rook character wasn't in it that much. So I was like, again, super content, super happy. Let's keep it going. I love the fact that Andy was there watching And they're like, let her out, let her out, let her out. And he's like, again, he set the xenomorph set the trap, which shows you the intelligence of the xenomorph, which is a major issue that I have with Alien vs. Predator, which is always what I've been saying because they're smart, intelligent creatures. They don't
Mhm.
show us that. So in this one, it did clearly show that it was setting up a trap. I love that Andy didn't do it, and the way that the character of Tyler found out that she was pregnant and then turns back and Andy didn't. I saw the compassion in it. And then when the xenomorph still strikes her, the anger of not only did you just let her die, you did it to a pregnant person. The character being pregnant, because you always knew that was going to play a factor in the story.
Mhm.
I was content right there if she would have just died. I would be like, hey, that to me already had enough of because it built more of the anger towards the Andy character between Tyler and then Rain kind of caught in the middle. I was content with that. I don't feel like you needed to do anything else with that pregnancy. You
You
could
knew
have
it was
ended it there. You
you
you knew
knew
it
it
was
was
coming,
coming. You knew it was coming.
but I wish it didn't because some people could have said, "Oh, well, then you said her pregnant just for her to die, and it made no sense for her to be pregnant." Yes, but from
Well,
a character standpoint,
an
the brother
emotional
knowing,
standpoint.
yeah, exactly, knowing that she's pregnant and he still can't get her out, and you watch her die. I thought that the emotional effect was still there of her being
Yeah.
pregnant, where I felt like it wasn't a waste of her being pregnant there.
No. Well, when she first says that she is pregnant, and I said, like, of course, they
Of
got to
course,
put
she
a
is.
baby involved. They got to put a baby because it adds to the emotional. Like, if
Yep.
seeing a pregnant woman be unalived doesn't affect you harder than if it was just a non-pregnant. Like, I mean,
Yes.
it should just affect you harder. Like, it's sad. It's really sad. Uh, but then in my head, I'm like, where are they going to go with that? And I thought they could have went somewhere different.
So at this point, I was already very aware of all the beats that they're taking of previous Alien movies. I'm like, he's just mixing
Yes.
everything in, and now we're back to
Hmm.
Prometheus, right? She's pregnant. They're probably going to go similar with this, I'm assuming, which I was hoping that they weren't. Well, but just the fact that you have somebody pregnant there, that's where I felt like, again, you're adding another beat to this. Again, please stop doing this. Just stick to the original story you were telling. That was really cool. You didn't need the extra stuff. You don't need to do the remember this, remember this. Yes, I remember that because I saw the movie before I watched this movie.
Yeah.
I'm here because I love the franchise. I
Hmm.
remember the movies. I don't need to be reminded how much I love the movies.
Hmm.
Okay, now is this when we
Hmm.
hit the black goop
You know
after she
what?
dies? Yeah, right?
Yeah, it's where we hit the black
Okay.
goo.
So the black goop is about 40 minutes, 50 minutes. So it's just when we're starting to hit the third act a little bit, is this black goop scene, is what we keep referring to it as. And I remember reading about this where people just kept saying, man, that third act goes way out there. Man, that third act is written by freaks. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Is that something super awesome? Is it something so rad? That's what I was hoping for. And I just automatically assumed before I watched this movie. And so when I'm watching, I'm like, oh, we're getting to that third act, man. This whole first two thirds of this movie, like the majority of this movie has been so awesome so far. I'm like about an hour and 10 minutes in. This movie's amazing. It's great. It's still easily in the 9 range. And then they come across that lab scene where they're there with Rook and the black goop. And you mentioned about how they were pulling out the black liquids from the face huggers, right? And that as soon as we saw it, I was like, no, you couldn't stop yourself from incorporating Prometheus. I was so disappointed when I saw that. I literally said that out loud. He just couldn't stop himself. He couldn't stop himself. I literally said that out loud in the theaters. And then as I sat there back there, I was literally angry for a little bit because I'm like, please stop making Prometheus work. Like, just make the Alien franchise be its own thing, right? Just please, for the love of God. But then as I sat back, it made me, I started finding, again, I'm trying to look at it optimistically. And I said, okay, you pulled the black sludge from the face hugger. Okay. Different necessarily than the Prometheus, because the Prometheus, they created the black synthetic form, whatever David guy created it, right? And then that's what eventually spawned the face hugger. So if you're pulling the black gook or whatever this stuff is from the face hugger, well, you're essentially just pulling it out of the xenomorph. And the reason why I always had an issue with that is because I wanted the xenomorphs and the face huggers and everything to be real creatures that just exist on their own. I didn't
Me
want them to
too.
be synthetically created monsters. That's why I
No.
had such major issues with it. Stop making them synthetically created. Just make it be that. So when you had this black gook made from the face huggers, if you were to wipe away Prometheus, that's still a thing because these creatures still existed. So that's how I was able to convince myself, okay, I can still rock with this. I could still
Well,
rock with this because despite the fact that it's an obvious Prometheus shout out, you didn't say anything about it. So it's almost like you're pulling, you had the black gunk to make the face hugger, but now you're pulling the black gunk from the face hugger. So if I take away that first part, like the Old Testament versus the New Testament, well, only the New Testament exists now. So according to this, they just pulled the black gook from the face hugger, and I was like, okay, that was the first time that like I'm really gonna have to swallow this and try to look optimistically to see for him to catch this landing. How did you feel about the black gunk?
I saw the black gunk, and at first I didn't tie Prometheus into it. I was like, this is something different. Maybe this is some sort of different thing, right? Okay. And then he says it's the Prometheus something. He says the word Prometheus, Rook
Mm-hmm.
says. And I'm like, right away, I'm like, "Oh, I didn't want any Prometheus in this movie. I didn't want anything to do with it. I wanted it to be an alien movie. I wanted it to be Alien, takes place in between Alien and Aliens. Get Prometheus out of here.
Out of here.
I was and and then I was thinking, okay, okay, it's just black goop. You know, that's all we're gonna get. We're gonna get the black goop. They're trying to, and I understand this too. He's taking all the alien lore and all the alien movies, putting it into one, and I understand that because I also understand Ridley Scott produced it, and I know there's people out there who really don't like Prometheus, and I think Ridley Scott is like arrogant. I've so behind the scenes, the aliens and
Yes.
everything, he's a and I can see him being like, "We are making this canon, and you are making a movie, and you're putting Prometheus in there,
And it's
and it
the
has
only
to
way
be
you're
all
gonna
tied
make
in."
this. There's
Yeah,
only
that's.
way you're making this movie.
I do
I
not
felt
blame
that too.
Fede for any of this. I think it was totally he had to do it. I don't blame
Yeah.
Fede for it. I don't. I don't.
I
I love.
I I,
I'm keeping my love for
I
Fede pure.
don't I don't either, and I know it's really Scott in this because like he had a I saw an interview question the other day where they asked him his top four favorite movies, and you know what one of them was? Blade Runner. His own movie is in his top four favorite movies of all time. Ridley Scott.
Oh, yeah.
So that just tells you the level of arrogance. But when I saw that, I was just like, no.
Well,
That's
I was thinking no too, but then I was thinking if this is the only shout out to Prometheus, I can
yes.
handle it. I can handle the black
I
goop.
could yes.
Cool, cool. And
Yes.
then I was like still convincing myself too, of like, don't Prometheus. But then I was like, if this is the black goop, okay, fine.
So then we
That's it.
saw the idea of like, okay, well, we just easily convinced you guys. You guys have to take this black gook and take it back to wherever you guys are going with the humans. I'm like, okay. It's hard for me for the humans to believe that right away. But
Yeah,
again, let's just move on with the story. It's not that big of a momentum killer, but already my score dropped down to easily a 9.0, maybe an 8.8 after I saw that black coop. And I was like, you got to bounce back, baby. You got to bounce back,
yeah,
please. And then them knowing that Andy is not on their side. Oh, but then when they run away, and then we saw the thing about the rat, right? Well, we saw the rat, and then
yeah.
once they ran away, you saw it kind of exploding. So like the thing just kind of sitting there, and I was like, okay. So
Okay.
clearly they still didn't quite perfect it, which then made you realize that obviously Rook knew that. He knew that the thing didn't do that, and that's what tells you with the synths, they don't care. Right? They don't care
No,
that the humans, if anything, they probably want them annihilated so that they rule everything, probably.
not even just that. The robot wouldn't care because he's just programmed to do his objective.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
the rat's exploding, he doesn't care.
He
He
doesn't
just
care.
wants it. He's
Yeah.
programmed to get that out, and so that's what he's going to do. That's
Yes.
his objective.
Which again made it too much where it was the synths that are too much involved with the storyline, the synths being too
Hmm.
much of the villains, the corporation being too much of the
Yeah.
villains, like too much of the
Hmm.
empires. Like just make it the xenomorphs,
Xenomorph.
please.
Yes, the xeno.
Please.
This is when the xenomorph takes a back seat, and it's not the main threat anymore. And it's
Yes.
humans are the threat, and then alien synths are the threat. And no, I want to see a monster movie with the xenomorphs being the
That's
scary
it.
thing. Take everything else
Yes.
out. You did enough
Yes.
different things already. You did enough different things already. I really hurt my hand doing that because
Good.
I
Good.
I have major feelings about this movie, and I just needed to hurt my hand a
Yes.
little bit.
So it was at this point where I was like, okay, you're losing me here. You got to find it on track, right? So then it
Yeah,
was like maybe like an extra 15 minutes of just action packed, them trying to escape. They mentioned about the guns, which seemed super convenient, how it just auto
yeah.
targets, but like
Cute.
whatever. I couldn't live with it, whatever. You're clearly setting it up again. It felt like so many things that we were just setting up to pay off later, but like too much at this point. Fine, whatever. So now we're at the part where she takes out, she goes back, right? So she tells the girl, just get back on the ship. The girl decides to take the black gunk, stick it in her, which didn't make any sense because she wasn't there involved when Rook was explaining why it was powerful and all that stuff. She wasn't there. Why would she think to use it?
Well, because we needed that in her, Daniel, somehow. We needed
We
that in a
didn't.
human
We
somehow. No, we
didn't.
didn't.
No,
We
we didn't.
absolutely net no. Mhm.
Okay, so then she injects herself for God knows whatever reason, goes in the ship. That's when, Rook's trying to sabotage and we know this stuff. And then that's when she then, the anti-gravity, right? She turns on the anti-gravity after hearing the dad joke, which they set up again. And it
Yeah.
was another payoff, which again, okay, but a
Mhm.
little too
I
much at this
mean,
point for me.
but watching Alien Resurrection is all about, there's so much foreshadowing and plant and payoff in that movie. Like,
Yeah. At this point, I agree with you. This is when I'm like, you are just taking everything of every alien movie and it's just filling. It's like you're just giving me a remix version of
ah,
everything just sliced together like a fully supreme pizza of just like all these combos of everything that's on it. It's just like it's too much now. It's too
yeah.
much because Alien Resurrection had this, Aliens had this, Alien had that, Alien
Hmm.
3 had this. You're giving me all of them, and now it's feeling like it's too much. Like it's not simple enough anymore. You're overcomplicating it at this point.
With all the Alien movies, like you say, they're all different genres. They all feel like they have different tones, different feels. They're separate movies for a reason. And none of them, well, maybe Aliens kind of fit together in the same like feel or world. But that's why you can't fit all the Alien fucking movies in one
No.
thing because you're
No.
contradicting yourself and it feels like a hodgepodge and it's confusing
Yes.
and
And the
conflicting.
tones and the tones are shifting way too much at this point because
Mhm.
Alien Resurrection and Alien aren't the same tone and genre, but yet you're
Not at all.
forcing it in this one where you had horror stuff, but now you have lighthearted, dad joke stuff, which is very Alien Resurrection like. And it's just like at this point, I'm like, okay, we're now in the 8 range. At this point,
Yeah.
we're in the 8 range and
Yep.
it's dropping right now. It's like really dropping. You just got to
Mhm.
stick the landing at the ending. And now I can comfortably walk away and saying it's not part one or part two. Get it out of here. It did too much already.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
now it's now like okay, it's probably still better than Alien Resurrection, and maybe or at least the conversation about which one's better, right? At
Mhm.
this point, because I
Yeah.
still really like the characters and stuff with it. That's where I was. Still better than 3 is where I was at this point.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. But okay, before we get to like the very, very final thing, okay, so we have to
Yeah.
talk about that huge chunk
The
in the middle, the
acid thing, right?
anti-gravity acid and all that
Yes.
stuff.
Yep. Absolutely.
How did you feel about that scene?
I didn't love that scene. And for me, if the movie would have ended there and that was the big bad main climax, I thought it was very anticlimactic.
Hmm.
I know that they set up the anti-gravity thing. I thought they could have done a lot better. Them kind of swirling around. It was like kind of like a cool little idea, I guess, but I just didn't like the execution. And at this point, this is when I say the first half of the movie, I felt like he had a lot more time to film. And I felt like it started feeling very rushed by the end because even when they had the scene, where you see Andy towards the end and he's running and you see him kind of touch the ground, right? And it's like you say, like the
Yeah.
blue light, but they had that blue light set up where it was over the eggs. It was
Oh
or I think it
yeah.
was aliens, yeah, right? They had it over
Yeah.
the eggs as like a way to stop them from hatching. And then finally, when the guy stepped through, that's what ended up getting the egg to hatch, which ended up getting him attacked. When you
Yeah.
see Andy touching it there, it was there for no reason. Like it was there just like a shout out. Like there was no xenomorph eggs or anything there, and it was so low to the ground. There was no reason for it to be there. So I don't understand why the light was there. And that's
Mhm.
when I started feeling like you're doing way too much fan
Too much.
service at this point now, where it doesn't even make sense to the story anymore. And you're just
Mm-mm.
doing, remember this? Do you remember that? Yes, I remember it, Fed. I remember it. You don't need to show it to me. Like you don't have to do a greatest hits album. Like I get
Yeah,
it.
I know.
Okay.
And
So
there's too many hits in
there's
Alien
too
to
many
do the whole
hits.
thing. And
Yes. So
the
the acid.
anti-gravity, yeah, the
Yes.
acid. Okay. I thought that was a smart thing and I thought it was really cool. like again, I'm like, this is so a video game. I'm like, this is like so. I didn't need that scene in an alien movie. Like, I didn't need it. But I did think it was a cool scene because of just like video game mentality. And just being like a nerd about that. I thought that was cool. I just felt it was too
Mhm.
much already. And then the shooting, it was the shooting, and then the elevator.
Yeah. So the idea was really good. I wish instead of going more horizontal, I wish they went vertical with the
Mhm.
thing which they ended up doing later in the elevator, but now I felt like it was too much now at that point. If you would have just done it once in the elevator, that would have been it. I would have been cool with that. You could have just done it there, boom, you know.
Mhm.
That's when I started feeling like it was too much, but I didn't love that scene. Great idea. I
Mhm.
didn't love the acid scene, and that's when I'm like, okay, this is like the big bad end scene. It felt anticlimactic to me. They did the elevator shaft, which we saw. It was whatever. I mean, it was again started feeling anticlimactic again. But
It's too
then
much.
when you get Andy that ends up shooting and it's like, get your hands off her, I was like, no,
Yeah.
no, you had to use a line. And he turns around, you bitch. I'm like, no, because at no point did he ever curse. It made no
No.
sense for his character to ever do that. Now you're just doing it because of callbacks, and now it felt like too much fan service. And I was like, oh God.
I know. I know.
All
I know.
right. So then they end up on the ship, right? So then we're end up on the ship. She plugs them in, and now we get into the final 15, 20 minutes of this movie. If the movie just would have ended there, let's say she puts the girl in the cryogenic chamber. Let's say she puts the robot, Andy, and he's like downloading or whatever he's doing, right? He's in hibernation mode. Let's say Rain puts herself in hibernate, in cryogenic chamber, right? Then let's say right when the movie ends, right? You see like something going on with that girl's stomach, and then the movie ends. What would have been your score right there with the movie?
Okay. Probably an 8.
I would have given it an 8, maybe an 8.2, maybe an
Yeah.
8.2.
Yeah.
The ending would have sucked, but because that first half was so damn good,
Mhm.
like remember up to this point, if it's like a 2 hour movie, right? Which now you would have to say it's about an hour 40 minute movie, an
Mhm.
hour in, an hour 10 minutes in, we said it was still really good and it was at a 9. So you're talking about the
Mhm.
last 30 minutes of the movie. And it wasn't terrible up to that point with the stuff we're talking about. Like it was annoying, it was getting this, it was getting that, it was getting that. But I still would have been at an 8.2 probably at this point. I
Mhm.
would have been at an 8.2. And they did the last 15 minutes.
Okay. Whatever. I'm all for like a grotesque birth scene. I think it's awesome. I was like, this is so cool. And then the
But
egg
we
comes
saw
out.
it in Prometheus, though. We already saw it in Prometheus. Like we already
I
saw it
I
done better.
I know we did. I know we did, but I also just kind of I'm okay with it. I don't know. Gross birth scene. I think that's a horrific thing.
Yeah.
That just imagining that coming out, it makes me cross my legs tight. It's just gross. That was cool. The egg comes out. I'm like, oh, it's full egg. Okay, cool. And the egg, and I'm thinking a xenomorph freaking hybrid a little bit's gonna come out.
Something.
It's gonna be like kind of like the thing in Alien Resurrection, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, oh, they're either trying to get in cool. That would be really cooler. Like, like, oh, look, have sad eyes, like, my mommy. And I'd be like, okay, that's too much of a throwback still, but okay.
Well, first you see the
Yeah.
face in them. I'm like, that's just
Face.
a baby face.
Exactly. I'm like, that doesn't, I'm like, oh, it's just a baby. And then when you see the thing like crawling in the shadows, the whole theater was like, ugh, like at first, we were like, oh, like all of us were like, oh, because like, what is that? And then you see that it's a Prometheus face.
There was a few of them, and I said out loud, no. I said no out loud in the theaters.
You went there.
I'm
You went
like,
there.
you picked the worst part of Alien Resurrection, and you did it far, far
Far
worse.
worse. Like,
Because that was still prosthetic. That wasn't
yes.
CGI in Alien Resurrection. And you could sit there and argue because the thing about Alien Resurrection, even though you had the design of the creature and whatnot, even though I don't love that scene and it was my least favorite of the
Mm,
whole movie, I know people that defend it, and even I still defend it to some extent because you had the thing about it smelling the alien and it not feeling like it's mommy, right? Like it doesn't even communicate the same as it, and it doesn't hear the same, like everything about it. And then it smells Ripley, and then it more identifies with her more than the other one. And you saw the human eyes. And then the fact that it kills, the queen, there was still so much emotion and symbolism
Yes.
involved in that scene that like I get it. The only thing that sucked about it was more of like the creature design, I guess, even though it was still kind of weird looking. You could
Mhm.
say it's still cool. Some people could say it was super ugly and it was weird looking and offsetting. That's fine. But the idea and the concept behind that scene was still very fascinating.
Mhm.
This didn't have any of that. Like there was no reason why this was even in the fucking movie. Like
No,
I don't mean to be cursing, but oh my God.
everything I want to cry. Everything I loved about it, I'm like, it took it away. It ripped
It's
it away from me.
it became fucking stupid. I saw that I was like,
I
this is fucking stupid.
I hated it so much. And it wasn't just there for a little bit. There was like a good 15 minutes of this goddamn creature. And I'm
That
like,
was the
this is too
climax.
much. Oh God, I can't believe, but it's like we had three climaxes already. Do we need this terrible
Yes.
climax? We're gonna end on this. This is the one we're gonna end on. This Prometheus guy
I don't know if you caught this, okay? You know how you're saying then the mom's like touching like her and she's like lactating the black?
breastfeeding. Yeah,
The thing went and started breastfeeding on her thing, and I was like,
yeah.
what the hell are we watching?
Well, because you remember in the beginning of the movie when they're on like the whatever ship and it shows that painting and it shows the baby sucking on the dead mom's teat. I'm like, there's the callback. They're doing this. I'm like, that's where they're gonna throw. They're gonna put that. I mean, it wasn't graphic. They didn't show like the breastfeeding, but you knew it was breastfeeding on her. And I'm
But
just
it
like,
was
dumb,
terrible.
dumb, dumb.
And like the little mouth thing was so cheap and it was
Oh
all
my
just
God.
CGI'd and like the
Just
way that
doing
it
the
was just saying all
helmet.
deformed and the fact that it looked like Prometheus, you just drove it home that Prometheus existed in this everything. You're not just calling it like Project Prometheus. Ah,
This is my takeaway from this movie is whether or not you love the Prometheus movies is going to make or break this movie because there's some people who love Prometheus who love this
mhm.
movie. And that's what killed it for me. I was
Yes.
Daniel, Daniel, I was so disappointed that I was in a terrible mood and so angry and
Yes.
upset
I
all
was
night
last
long
night. I
and this
was last
morning too.
night. And even when they're in the bottom of the ship and like the sand and she has to flip levers, the whole thing was dumb. It reminded me very like Resurrection and the fact that the acid blood and the thing gets sucked out is literally the exact same thing as
Yeah.
Alien Resurrection.
Yep.
Literally the exact same thing. And then when you see it getting dragged and you see her pulling herself up in the suit, it looked very bad. Like to me, it didn't look very good graphics. Looked
Nope.
very cheap.
Hmm.
At this point, I'm like, you lost all credibility.
Hmm.
The last 15, 20 minutes was terrible. You see them get back, you get back, and she goes back in the cryogenic, thing, and then they take off. So like
Lame. Boring.
l- literally that last 20 minutes was literally pointless. It did nothing for
Yeah.
the storyline at all outside of that girl
No.
dying.
Right. Sucked.
Could have
Terrible.
died by the xenomorph. She could have died by the xenomorph, like I said at that scene with Andy, and nothing. That's it.
They could have landed. They had to go back home. So sad, sad story, sad ending. She doesn't get off that planet. She has to go back home and save her friend who's pregnant. Then she could have had like a friggin' alien whatever, and then
Hmm.
cut. Now it's
Yep.
now it's in the freaking world. Now you know what's gonna happen. Done.
Who
Cut.
knows what's gonna
Horrifying.
happen? Yep. Or them stuck on the ship and you see it, the blood coming out, but then the other one's
Hmm.
already in the cryogenic for, and they don't see it, and we, the
Yeah.
audience, doesn't see what it is. We don't know how it
Hmm.
ends. They could have died on the ship. They could have not. That saves you up,
Yep.
sets you up for a sequel, right? They didn't
Done.
do that. Fine. Okay, so what's your score?
Hey, I can't deny the fact that the first hour is very beautiful. I can't deny that there's scenes in this movie that had me so excited to the verge of tears. I can't deny that the technology in it and everything that they had looked genuine to like Alien, like the first Alien movie. It was perfect. It wasn't too advanced. It was just the right era of like the technology, the score, amazing. The lighting, the aesthetic, and the colors. My God, the colors all beautiful and perfect. Loved it. Can't deny that. But that ending robbed me of everything that happened. I don't know, but 6, 6.5, 6.3, because that ending.
That's fair. I'm gonna, man, I really want to give it a 7 because that first hour and 10 minutes,
That's why I'm giving it like a little bit more than a 5, because I'm giving it more than half, because a
but
little
it
more
was
than halfway I
so
liked it.
bad. Yeah, it's
The
still so
ending was
bad.
so
So
bad.
I'm gonna give it a 6.2. I'm gonna give it a 6.2.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So 6.2
Fair.
is fair. 6.2 is fair because it did so many things well. Now, here's a
Hmm.
way that you can view this. And for those of you that are so angry at the ending on how I can sit there and watch this alien movie, right? Alien movie. How can I watch this alien movie and still love the alien movie? Well, the alien movie is the xenomorphs, right?
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
watched it because the xenomorphs, the face huggers, and everything else that we saw. That was the alien movie. The aliens died within that acid bath, and that's where the movie ended. Now you have the last 15, 20 minutes, which they gave us, which was all Prometheus and all that stuff, but that has nothing to do with the xenomorphs. That's the Prometheus storyline.
Hmm.
That's it. The alien movie ended when the aliens died. That was your alien storyline. It now took on the Prometheus one to add it to like sort of staple it at the very end because you could tell that was a Ridley Scott thing. Like
Yep.
you're being
Yes.
forced to do this. And he
Yep.
did a shout out to Alien Resurrection as a way to kind of make it feel kind of alien like, even though you took
Mhm.
the exact same thing that Alien Resurrection did, which would people argue is the worst part of Alien Resurrection. That's the part you mimicked at the end, and you did it almost beat for beat. It felt like too much. That was it. The aliens, when she killed them with the alien bats, and then Andy did it with the elevator thing, the alien movie ended. That was it.
I agree. Overall, this movie was not what I was expecting. I feel like the trailer lied, and I feel like the interviews lied. There's heavy use of CG in this movie, heavy use, and sure, the xenomorph was real, but then there's the other xenomorphs that were all crawling around. I'm like, well,
Okay.
I just feel I feel deceived, and that made me angry. I'm very
Okay.
deceived.
So I had a and that's why we want to do this because it's like therapy for us. So
Yeah.
I love the idea. The thing that I loved so much about this story, about this movie in particular, is that it became a third world story. And you had
Mhm.
characters that were fighting for freedom
Mhm.
more than anything, and the monster represented their obstacle. Whereas with the other ones, it was man that was the evil villain that was creating these monsters apparently that that we learned, and they're trying to use them and trying to weaponize them and whatnot. That's what it became. It became man versus corporation, basically Luke versus the Empire. That's what
Mhm.
the Alien movies were. This is the only one that hit us with something else, and it felt very low based. It felt more realistic. It felt more
Mhm.
like people trying to, again, starving and fighting for humanity, right? Because even their own planet was collapsing, the planet that they were staying on and stuff, where people were dying from, lung cancer or whatever it was, right?
Mhm.
In the mines and all that. That was so fascinating to me, and that's why when you see their desperation to go on this ship and to go to the level extent of this, where the guy's even freezing his hand and like, we gotta go. It's like, we can't go. Like, we need this. Like, we need this. We
Mhm.
have no option. We can't go back home. There is no home. That's not our home. We got to get out of here. I
Yeah.
felt that. And that's why I say that first hour and 10 minutes, that first hour of the movie, the first half of the movie, I felt all that. And that was the most realistic realness we got out of this whole Alien franchise. And I want to focus on that more than the last 20
Mhm.
minutes because it's unfair to the entire movie to say that was it. And even when he introduced the xenomorph and it became this monster movie that it should have always been, it's so beautiful on how he did things and the sets and everything that like it's I'm still not going to walk away saying this movie sucked. I can't do that. There was so many
Mhm.
great things about it. The
There
last
was.
20 minutes was one of the most awful things I've seen. Like,
Mhm.
it sucks. I want to
Fair.
go off on a whole rant. I watched the Umbrella Academy and I saw the last season and I just am so angry with how they ended it. And that was just like a couple days ago, and now I'm watching this
I
one,
know.
and now I'm so angry with how they ended it. It's like
Relive it.
I don't know what to say. People just can't seem to they just can't seem to stick the landing anymore. I don't know what it is.
I wish they would have kept that raw human emotion storyline. Exactly like chance for trying to survive is basically what it is. And trying to survive like in a way where you want a better life. You want to
Mhm.
feel like you're alive, and then you're trying so hard to get away from this horrible life so that you can feel something, live, see the sun, have a beautiful life. And then there's this freaking out as a monster. It's like we can't escape it. That's horrible. That's horrifying. That's a horror movie.
Yes.
But then you add the corporation in again. You add that humans are the bad ones. You add the AI is the bad ones. You add Prometheus goddamn bullshit in it, and it takes away from the beauty and rawness of the first half. And I can't forgive that. I won't forgive it. I don't. But I can't sit here and also say, "Oh," and I can't say that what a terrible movie because there was so many beautiful things about it. But I hate how
Yeah.
much I can't forgive how
Yes.
bad that ending was and how much it tainted it. Unforgivable. I can't.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. You could tell Ridley has his hands all over it.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
felt like that. Yeah, and it felt like if almost like if this was a sacrifice that Fede had to do was that whole
yeah,
second half was just for him to be able to do his first half. Like that was the only way he was ever going to be able to do it. That in his opinion, it was worth the sacrifice, and he gave
yeah,
us the first half is one of the greatest alien movies I've ever seen. The first half is one of the greatest alien movies I've ever seen. But we're almost verging on the point now where there's more Prometheus lore. Like Prometheus
mhm,
has been more in these alien movies than they haven't been. But
yeah,
it's not there yet. It's 4-3 right now. We got more
mhm,
alien movies with
mhm.
and the two Prometheus and now this one.
Stop trying to make Prometheus happen. Like, just stop.
Stop trying to make that's why I said I felt like that. Stop trying to make fetch happen, please.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
all right. On that note, check out some of our content. We're a little more happier and joyful about some of the content we're talking about. You can follow us, subscribe, comment, share on the YouTube channel, Not a Strong Start. You can listen to us and listen to your podcast. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, Not a Strong Start. I'm your host, Daniel de Sangre. You can follow me at King_Sangre.
And I'm your very upset Xenomorph queen. You can find me at Marie Plays It All. I'm gonna go birth some eggs right now. I'm so mad.